So, Leanne, welcome to the Lifted podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me.
I'm so excited because we get to test out the new couches, the new
Yeah,
setup.
comfy.
Very excited.
Yeah, love it.
So, I want to get into a little bit of just your history with mental health within your family and just yourself. So, do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So I guess like growing up, there was a lot of mental health issues. I didn't know. I don't think any of us knew about it. I was in grade 2, and that's when I guess, witnessed someone's first attempt, and then someone passing from suicide. Yeah, she lived in our home, and yeah, she passed from that, and then that is the first time that I know my dad got sick right after she had passed. So, yeah, my dad after that was in the psych ward for some time, and yeah, it was just very different, I guess, seeing him. It was just like he was like a hollow shell. And we went to the hospital to see him, and yeah, he just looked basically right through us and just cried and whatnot. And so that was the first time I knew that he had a breakdown and his first hospitalization. And then throughout the years, he was hospitalized a lot throughout the years, and was like diagnosed with manic depressive, which is now the title as bipolar. So yeah, he had manic highs and severe lows, and yeah, he he lost the fight. It was 20 years here in November. He's been passed. So, and there, yeah, definitely a lot of other suicides on his side of the family as well. So
Yeah.
just growing up, it was very, very repetitive and very not talked about. Yeah, we knew what happened, but nobody discussed like how it impacted everyone around all the family. Like it was very hush hush. Yeah.
It seems like that's how it is a lot of the time is like everyone kind of avoids the topic. Like nobody really wants to talk about it. So with dealing with that when you were growing up, like how did that affect your mental health?
It definitely affected my mental health. I think my mental health started more being affected. Well, yeah, it was affected by definitely my dad's in and out of the hospital, like watching him go through that. And my parents really struggled, I guess, like a lot in their marriage. And when dad was in the hospital, like the kids, we ran the farm, and, like us kids had very much a adult role, I guess, growing up when dad was sick. And yeah, that, I guess, was kind of like that. I forget the question.
How did it affect you when you were growing up, like your mental health?
So I think my mental health really started getting affected when I was being molested as a child, and I obviously didn't speak about it because like nothing was ever talked about in our family, like mental health, none of it. And the person that was molesting me was, I was encouraged to play with this person, and encouraged by my father, I guess. He didn't know what was happening, but yeah, because this person didn't have a lot of friends, so I was encouraged to play with this person. And I think that caused a lot of the mental health problems, I guess, and also a very hard relationship with my dad, because then I started like drinking and numbing and using drugs and alcohol to cope, I guess, with that. And my dad's outtake was like, why is she acting out? And he never once asked me why I was acting out. It was just like, she's a bad girl. She's a, just a disgrace to the family and stuff like that. So that's when my mental health, I think, started to really go down. I would just try numbing out with drugs, alcohol, and like taking bottles of Tylenol just to like sleep through the night, just to like hope to not wake up. And yeah.
So when was this? Like, how old were you when all of this started happening?
I think it started happening when I was like maybe in grade 3. And then in like grade 8, I was just kind of like, get the fuck out of my room. And then it kind of stopped. So, but that by that time, like I was already like balls deep into drinking and stuff like that. And then into like bad relationships, just trying to get like any kind of gratification from boys because I wasn't getting that from my dad.
I was going to ask that. Like, how did all of that? Because if you have like this, not even that it was like a bad relationship with your dad, but just like this kind of like, I'm going to act out kind of thing, like, did that affect your relationships? Like you're saying?
Oh,
Like,
for sure. Yeah, like I went for the bad guys. I went for anyone that would give me attention. And I was the bitch, right? Like they would like me, and then I would treat them like shit, kind of deal. But yeah, then I just started like I would go from relationship to relationship, and that started probably when I was like in grade 8, right? Like I started dating in grade 8, and then in like by grade 11, I was already starting dieting, and I probably weighed 110 pounds, right? Like just trying to be this perfect body type, this perfect look that, guys, I guess, would like me because I didn't feel like I was good enough or getting that acceptance at home.
just very like toxic behavior, which I mean, like, let's be honest, like, I feel like all of us went through that in high school in some sense. Like,
Yeah.
I can definitely relate to the whole you were kind of just looking for anyone to give you that attention that you
Yeah.
weren't getting. I felt like I was kind of the same in the sense of my parents gave a lot of attention to my sister. And so I was the rebel going out and drinking and just trying to like numb that and being like,
Yeah.
okay, like someone give me some sort of attention because I
Yeah.
feel like I'm not getting it at home kind of
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
Makes you like act out, makes you rebel a little bit. And
Yeah.
of course, like you're looking for those relationships that are gonna essentially like make you feel better, right?
Oh, for sure.
So your mental health throughout high school was obviously just went downhill starting in grade 8, starting in I guess grade 3, you said?
Well, the molestation started in grade 3, so I
Okay.
think like the acting out and the numbing started probably in grade 8. Yeah,
8-ish,
like the
yeah.
drinking, and I probably started drinking in grade 7 and partying. But yeah, the drinking and the drug use, and yeah, like blacking out and waking up and being like, oh, why is there a rug burn up my back, and not remembering like getting raped and stuff like that, and just to the point where it was just like totally blacking, numbing out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just trying to forget life essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so with your mental health going downhill, can we talk about your attempt?
Yeah, so I attempted a year after graduating. So in 1997, I attempted. I had basically lived with a guy, and my dad was sick at the time, and it was very hard because he was very scared, and he was depressed, and so it was just like us kids kind of took care of him. And I was scared. I didn't want to be there. So I basically was already moved out before I even graduated. And then I was kind of like, I latched on to this guy. It was not probably a very good relationship. We've talked since. But just, wanting that safety and being away from the stress and stuff like that. And when he broke up with me, it crumbled my world because I didn't want to go home. And I didn't want to face what was there. And yeah, I attempted. And yeah, I was unconscious and drug out and saved and took into the psych ward. I was on the psych ward for a month. And yeah, so that was that. But it never got better after that because I never changed anything after my attempt. Like I was on and off antidepressants, but it never changed anything. And then I just went from relationship to relationship to relationship to relationship. And that landed me in the very abusive relationship I was in. And yeah, kind of went from there.
So you went into the psych ward for a month
Mm-hmm.
after that. Like, you're saying that nothing changed. Is there something better that they could have done? Because I've heard, don't quote me on this, anyone, but I've just heard that like the way that they deal with mental health is just not very good. Like they don't really know how to deal with it. They kind of just let people out, like just because they don't have enough beds or they don't have enough room or whatever. Do you think there's something better that they could have done, or do you want to explain like that, even the process that they kind of took you through?
It's so long ago, it's hard to remember. I remember that, like, I was so depressed, like, they wouldn't take me off my IVs until I would eat a cracker, like, just stuff like that, because I was just so depressed. But, like, I was still in contact with the person, you know, the reason why I was there, kind of deal. Like, you're in there, but it's up to you to change, right? Like, they're giving you tools and techniques, but I wasn't in the place ready to change. So, I was doing therapies, lots of counseling. Like we had family counseling sessions and stuff like that. I don't think that really much probably helped anything. And yeah, I don't know.
If you're not ready to change, like it's
Yeah.
so hard to just like force someone,
Yeah.
especially when you're in that headspace of like you're in this toxic relationship and this person is the reason that you were in there, but it's like if you're not ready to get over them or you're still in contact with them or whatever else, it's like you're not gonna get anywhere, right? And that's probably how it felt.
Yeah. Yeah, like I got out of the hospital and went right over there.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Of course.
so-
You're like first place I'm going.
Yeah, yeah, because I didn't want to go home, right?
Yeah.
Like my dad was sick. He was still sick when I was in the psych ward, and he got better shortly after. And then when he picked me up from the psych ward is probably the only bonding moment we ever had. And that was like, I think maybe one of the only times he said, I love you, you know, like maybe happy, I guess, that I didn't die. Right. So, that's probably the only really bonding moment we had until he was, depressed right before he killed himself. We had another heart to heart,
But those were like the only two moments that you guys really had.
yeah, because like I come from a family of very, like there's 6 of us, so there was, you know, other relationships that he had really good relationships with, but I was like acting out. So, you know, like, I don't know, I guess.
And as a parent, like, I mean, I think about myself if I was a parent. I'm not a parent. If I was, and my kid was acting out, I'd be like, I would just feel like so frustrated. Like
Yeah.
you know, you want to like get to the bottom of it and be like, okay, like, why are you doing this? And like, what are you doing this for? And like, is there a way that, you know, I can maybe, you know, maybe I'm lacking in something, but people don't really look at themselves.
Yeah.
They usually just blame the child or they blame whoever else is doing it. So when you had attempted, how did it impact like your family?
It actually had a totally 360 impact. My mom actually ended up leaving my dad the day I was admitted into the psych ward, because she was like, I got to break this cycle, right? Like it is like a learned behavior too, right? Like I had seen so many suicides over my lifetime that it was like acceptable, right? And my family never talked about like how it affected everyone, right? And talked about there's other ways. So it almost made it acceptable. And when my dad did it, I was like, oh, it felt like a relief because it was still accepted. I thought it, you know, his suffering's over, but there's totally other ways that he out, right? So yeah, my mom actually left my dad at that time. And when I was released out of the psych ward, I lived with my mom, and they started a very gruely divorce.
Which probably lasted years.
It lasted years. Yeah.
So you moved in with your mom. What then happened with you and your dad?
My dad actually ended up with one of my older friends. Yeah. So he got remarried and they were together for like 2 years. And it was very hard, I think, for all of us kids, but very hard when he passed because we had all known, like, we've seen dad break down how many times. So the signs were all there for us, but she's never dealt with that. So there, it was very hard because we were like, he needs to be in the hospital. He needs to go to the hospital. And it was just like falling on deaf ears. So, yeah.
And so you guys had dealt with that since, like you said, grade 2 or something, right? Like with your
I
dad just being sick.
I think probably from grade 2 to like since his attempt, he was probably on the psych ward, I would say maybe 4 or 5 times for sure. And then bouts of like depression or, yeah, on and off that didn't warrant a psych ward. But, and like still to this day, I was thinking of it driving here, like, I don't know the whole story. Like, it's under lock and key still, right? Like, my mom won't talk about it. And yeah.
And like you're so young that, like, you know, you're also trying to live your life while like if I think about like my parents and stuff, they didn't tell me a lot of stuff when I was growing up, of course,
Yeah.
right? They keep it quiet, they keep it hush hush, you know. And so like did you, because I don't really know how the psych ward works. Did you get to see him while he was in there?
Yeah.
Yeah. Did like what did you think when you were younger? Like
It's a strange place to be in. And growing up, we're like, why are we even allowed to go here? Like, because you see people are screaming, people are restrained, people, and dad was like just an empty face. But I think as kids, we probably wanted to see our dad, right? So
yeah, of course, you'll go
yeah.
anywhere. Like you
Yeah.
want to see your dad, and when you're that young, like your dad is your dad. It doesn't matter where he is, what he's doing. Like, did you know that that was? I guess you wouldn't even know that that was really a psych ward. Like you were just going to visit your dad, and then eventually you'd find out, right?
Yeah, well, we didn't. The first time, I don't even think we knew it was a psych ward, and then we walked in and we're like, "What the hell's going on with Dad?" Right? Because he just like he looked through you and he just cried and he didn't say a single word. Yeah, and then that's like we seen that how many times? That's years after that too.
So after a while, it's just normal to you.
It wasn't normal, but it was like, well, then we know what's actually happening. Yeah. So I'm not sure if he had been hospitalized or struggled with mental health before that when I was 2 years old. I don't know. Still a question. I probably won't ever get the answer.
Maybe
so.
one day you'll find
Yeah.
out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And can I ask about your siblings? How did they take it?
My dad's passing?
All of it, yeah.
Well, you know what? I guess a lot of us still don't talk about it. Like we talked about, like we went to family counseling after it happened. But like me recently sharing my story publicly last month, some people didn't like that, right? It's like I don't have a lot of communication with a lot of my family. Yeah.
Yeah. And how are you after attempting? Like how's your mental health after that?
So after attempting, yeah, I still struggled over the years. I struggled a lot, but not bad, like that I needed hospitalization. When I was with my abuser, I was with him for like 7 years. And then I had taken a break, but I guess my mental health was okay. And then I had my daughter, and my spouse was on the road, and my son was 5 and he was having night terrors. So, and I was trying to breastfeed. So it was like, I literally remember thinking, I'm just not going to fucking sleep. I'll stay up and I'm going to deal with these kids and I'm going to drink wine. And I'm going to smoke cigarettes and I'm going to start making jewelry. And that was 14 years ago. So it's like a perfect recipe for disaster. And so I hadn't slept for probably a week or two. And I was like, anxious, and I'm like saying to my spouse, I need to get medicated. So I went into a clinic and they put me on Effexor, and it was just like, boom. I was like fucking firecrackers in my brain. I was shopping. I was manic and I didn't know it at the time. But it was a great feeling. Like, I stayed awake for days and, yeah, made jewelry and whatever. And then after that, it just all crashed down. And, yeah, I was put back in the psych ward for depression, and I folded my first business.
Especially when you're not sleeping and stuff, you know something's gonna crash.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you had no idea that you were acting that way. No idea.
Well, I remember my friend saying to me, like, she was like, holy shit, like, you're talking so fast, I don't even know what you're speaking about. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, look at all these ideas I'm having, right? And she's like, what the hell? So I didn't kind of recognize it, and I went to my doctor and I'm like, wow, I have like fireworks going off in my brain. And yeah, he prescribed me Effexor, and then it was just like, boom, like I was like in mania, and then it was just like whoosh, a straight dive down after that.
Yeah, just a straight fall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was my only like mania I had. I've had like little hypo and lows and hypo highs, but that was like what put me labeled as bipolar now. Is that first mania. That's the only episode, but yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I feel like mental health is it's such a popular thing now. I think a lot of us are, not even that it's popular, but I think it's just more people are opening up about it and obviously talking about it. And do you think that like just a lot of things that, the way you grew up, a lot of things that had happened, like that had a big effect on just your mental health and how you are now?
Yeah, well, the attempt is, I don't remember having memory problems. Like, I have short-term memory problems now, and I have like problems with speech and numbers. So I'm like, when I was admitted into the ward, or after my attempt, they did like MRIs and CAT scans to see the damage from my attempt, and there wasn't like a specific damage, but that they could note on MRIs and stuff like that. But there is, I think, there is obviously a cognitive damage there. Yeah, so it's definitely impacted my life. And I think, though, not sharing about it, like, I went to a retreat in September, and, I give all this to mental health and with my business and stuff like that. And just, it didn't even make sense why I didn't share about it, because people are probably like, well, why is she so passionate about it? What is she even talking about? Like, she's just making, whatever. So just by sharing about it, I think it just causes a lot of connection and understanding why I am so passionate about it. Yeah.
I think being vulnerable and sharing your story and sharing things that you've been through, even if it's really hard, because I know that this stuff it's definitely very deep and personal, and obviously stuff that's really hard to share about. But I do think that being vulnerable and sharing that stuff, like, I mean, even if I'm vulnerable on, say, my YouTube channel or on Instagram or whatever about stuff that I've been through, it's so hard to share, but it honestly makes, like, the connection is crazy between, like, people that, either have been through it, they know someone that's been through it, or I think that there's so many people that have been through mental health stuff, whatever it is, depression, bipolar, like anything. It's not talked enough about still. Like, I think we've started talking about it a lot more. So on that, do you want to tell us what you do now?
Sure. So yeah, since sharing my story, like, I admitted that I had a jewelry business and I folded it. And then, so now with every purchase, I donate to mental health. And then I have a special necklace. Every year I put out a new design, and I donate a higher percentage of it, and it's like a mental health design. And then I also, with proceeds from the purchases, I work and supply all the materials for teaching on the adolescent wards. I teach jewelry making to the youth, and I think that's probably like we talked about markets being very rewarding, but that is actually probably the number one rewarding part of my job is being on the board and just, maybe seeing a child smile for that one, like maybe 10 minutes that we interact, and like sharing my story, maybe giving them a little bit of hope that like, holy shit, she was just as fucked up as I was when she was 15, and she's actually has a business now. So maybe if I can make it through this shitty part, that there is hope to keep going. So yeah.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And I think it's really cool that you're trying to, and that you are actually like sharing and giving these people hope, because I think about like even me growing up, it took like you have to find those role models, and you have to find those people that, maybe they have been through the same thing that you have, and then you can look up to them and you're like, maybe I can actually do that, like
Yeah.
they're a person too. They've gone through everything that I've been through or close to. Maybe I can do that as well.
Mm-hmm.
So you do design all of your jewelry or most of it, or how does that work?
Yeah, I create and curate it. So I hand make probably about 90% of it, and then the other stuff I bring in to like match the collection. And yeah, I make it in my home studio, and I have a couple employees that help. So
That's so cool. We'll definitely put the link in the show notes. Last thing, what I love giving advice on my podcast for just things that you've been through and advice that you can give someone. So what advice would you give someone that maybe just lost a loved one to suicide or to mental health?
So everybody says that time will heal all wounds. And it's still every like November, it's as raw as it was the first day that my dad passed, I think. So I don't think that time heals all wounds. But I do think that talking about it does. Because like talking to a person that has lost someone to suicide, and the mind fuck that somebody, like it's a different mind fuck if you lose someone to suicide than it is to like cancer or car accident, because it's a huge guilt and unanswered questions. So I think just talking about it and talking to somebody that else has gone through the same thing is probably what's really helped me to deal with it. And I'm sad that some people around me are embarrassed to talk about it, because just me sharing, and like we talked earlier, when somebody comes to my booth and they share how they just lost their daughter or their mother to suicide, and we literally sit there and hold each other and cry about it, like that's what helps with healing. And it's the connection. I don't think it's time. I think it's talking about it. And I'm just as guilty as the next guy. Like, my kids never knew how my dad passed. All they knew growing up is that he died of a broken heart. And it was probably about 3 years ago that someone really close to me had attempted, and my son literally held me up, like from falling on the floor, and I just like lost it. And from there, we told them the truth. Like, this is a cycle in Mom's family. I did it. I tried. These were the consequences, right? And I think just telling them relieved a lot of burden, and maybe by talking about it, and not sweeping it under the table doesn't make it acceptable for them. Maybe, I hope. Yeah.
I also want to add to that. I think that's 100% right. Like, I think connection is. I've listened to a lot of podcasts that talk about connection and just how important connection is for not only women, but like men as well. Like, I think humans are meant to be connected, and I think that society has completely pushed us all apart, and we live our own little lives with our families and whatever. And I think also, I mean, speaking from experience, the way that I grew up, like my parents never really talked about a lot of things. There wasn't open communication. There wasn't, this is actually what happened. Like, I know my parents started talking about stuff now, slowly. But when I was growing up, like, there was just, no, I mean, I actually still feel it. I still feel like there's not that much communication. And maybe that's why I made a podcast, because I want to talk about more things.
Exactly.
Maybe that's why this is happening. But the connection thing is so real. And I think that's my whole goal with this podcast, is to have people actually be able to connect to you and your story, and whoever else is on the podcast to connect to their story and be able to actually understand that, like, we're not alone in everything that we struggle with.
Yeah.
And I think talking about it just helps us open up and feel so not alone, and not alone in our struggles and whatever we're going through. So I love that answer. I think that was perfect.
Yeah. I think, like, even connecting, that's how I connected with you, is through listening to one of your podcasts. Like, I literally thought I was the other woman of that abuser that was being talked about.
Yeah, that was
Right?
crazy.
Yeah.
And we were like, wait, what?
Yeah, I'm like, I'm the woman. I'm the woman with the kid, right?
You're like, it's me.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
it's
Well, I really, really appreciate you coming on and sharing your story. And I think it just opens eyes for a lot of women that are listening. So thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thanks.
Like, comment, subscribe, you guys, and I'll see you in the next episode.